Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank you for joining us tonight as part of an AAP and AMSSM Educational Committee endeavor. Tonight, we'd like to introduce you to the sports medicine career session, kind of navigating your niche in the different subspecialties of sports medicine, and just kind of exploring what that actually may look like in the different aspects of sports medicine as you look at your careers going forward. We have a nice lineup of speakers going out with us tonight. But just to kind of orientate you to our actual schedule tonight, we're going to have our keynote speaker, or as we're liking to say, key interest topic with Dr. Carly Day, who's our AMSSM president. And following that, we're going to have a panel and really exploring the different niches of what PMR looks like, exploring what sport and spine looks like, the kind of care for the female athlete, the role of the team physician, and then kind of exploring what it's like to be a physician scientist and how that integrates.
There's an AAP webinar about like niche.
Our goal here is to kind of give you a chance to explore just how truly you can take sports medicine and evolve it into the different areas that are your passions and what that could mean to you moving forward. Our first speaker tonight will be introduced by Dr. Reiser.
All right, so I'm very excited to be introducing Dr. Carly Day, who's our current AMSSM president and did her training here at my current institution at University of Virginia. Dr. Carly Day is going to be talking on how to succeed in sports medicine, gaining trust, building relationships, and being the best version of yourself. A little bit about Dr. Carly Day. She's the head team physician for Purdue University Athletics. She is from Cleveland, Ohio, and graduated from Miami University summa cum laude with honors. She completed medical school and a PM&R residency at the University of Virginia while being inducted into the AOA Medical Society. Dr. Day did a sports medicine fellowship at the University of Utah and worked at the Cleveland Clinic for 7 years prior to assuming her current role at Purdue. Dr. Day was a member of the NCAA COVID-19 Medical Advisory Group and is a team physician for the United States Soccer U20 Women's National Team. Her research interests include mental health, sleep, and iron deficiency in college athletes, as well as gender and racial diversity in sports medicine physicians. Dr. Day is the current president of AMSSM and mom to two children, ages 12 and 11. Without further ado, Dr. Day.
Thank you. All right, let me get my slides up. All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. So I'm going to give just sort of a general talk a little bit about what I think helps people do well within the field of sports medicine, but probably just in medicine in general and in life. So as Dr. Reiser mentioned, I've had my path and this is my high school, college, med school residency, fellowship, and each place along the way I've learned a lot. I, learned from people there, I've learned from the athletes that I've worked with, and it sort of helped me become the person that I am today. And I throw this out there that sort of my career path, everyone's looks a little different. You'll see the people who are on the panel later probably all had a little different path. So the first job I took out of fellowship was as a high school team physician. There was no collegiate coverage promised, no pro coverage promised, but it was a good job. I wanted to be closer to home. I took the job. And then within 6 months, I was offered the head primary care team physician role at a Division II university. And then I've been at Purdue the past 7 years now. And so, there's not one right way to do this. I have people come to me and say, I want to be a D1 head team physician. How do I get there? And I can't give you the exact path. I can tell you what I did, but everyone's is going to be a little different. Also, as mentioned, I'm the president of AMSSM, and there I also have had many steps along the way that have gotten me to where I've been. I started off by writing press releases, became a subcommittee chair, became a liaison, was on the program planning committee, then on the board of directors and became president. But when I have a flow chart like this, I want to be clear that it's not that each step was done in order to get to the next step, right? You don't get to plan things out that way. So every opportunity that came to me, my goal was just to do a really good job in that opportunity to, be proud of myself and the work that I did. And usually good things will come your way. when you do that. So my three topics I'm going to hit on is gaining trust, building relationships, and being the best version of yourself. And we're going to spend a lot of time about gaining trust, because to me, that's really one of the key things about being a sports medicine physician. Within gaining trust, there's three stakeholders that we interact with a lot, and that would be coaches, athletic trainers, and student athletes. Again, I'm in the college world, so a lot of my examples will be geared towards that, but there are other roles as well. So when it comes to coaches, I think they want to see that you're invested. So an example I gave about doing your research is, on an interview, I met with one of our football coaches as part of the interview, and I walk in, the first thing he says, he sort of sizes me up and says, "What's your favorite football play?" Which I thought was a weird question, but I was ready, and I said, "Well, coach, I'm from Cleveland, so I have a lot of least favorite football plays, like the drive and the fumble. But had they kept you longer than a few months, maybe you could have brought them to greatness," because I'd done my research. I knew he was on the Browns for a brief period of time, and got a good chuckle out of that, broke the ice, and had a really good rest of the interview. Really importantly is to know the sport, and you don't have to be the expert in a sport, but I think demonstrating a desire to learn about the sport is really important. So, wrestling is an example I give, where when I started my Division II school, I didn't know a lot about wrestling, but we happened to be like a D2 powerhouse, won the national championship while I was there. So when I was covering wrestling, I just asked questions. Oh, why does that score points? What makes that different than the other thing? Oh, what's he doing there? So it's like, I think their way of seeing me and my desire to learn the sport was just as good of me knowing the sport to start with. And now I know it because I've been around it a long time. But just getting to know the sport, if you think of these coaches, this is their life. Their whole life revolves around whatever sport they're coaching. And so for you to sort of validate that and show interest in it is going to help them understand that you really are invested in their athletes and trying to get them back to sport. So here's a little question that I'm going to ask everybody. So if you want to put it in the chat, you can put question number 1. The question is, how much time do you get to evaluate a concussion in NCAA wrestling? So you can put 1 and then either A, B, C, or D. And question number 2 is, can you take a wrestler off the mat to evaluate for a concussion in the NCAA? So you do 1 and then a letter, and then 2 and then a letter. And so as you guys are putting your thoughts in, part of this is knowing the sport, knowing the rules, and these are the things you need to know. You don't need to know what scores, 3 points in wrestling, what constitutes a takedown versus what doesn't. That's helpful, but you need to know, if you're going to be the physician, what the rules are here. And there's a mix of answers here, and not many of them are correct. So the answer is actually you have unlimited time and you can take them off the mat. So in the NCAA, you have unlimited time and you can bring them back to your training room if you have a good place. So if you're covering NCAA wrestling, you should know, what is going to be assessed right mat side and what is brought off the mat. So these are the things, and usually your athletic trainers will know, so feel free to ask them before you do any coverage, what am I allowed to do for concussions? So that would be D and A. Okay, so now talking to athletic trainers, they are the eyes and ears of sports medicine. We all know that. And so these are real examples that have happened to me. So, you have a baseball player with a sore throat. Well, the athletic trainer's like, did he tell you his girlfriend has mono? No, he did not. Okay. The cross-country runner with Reds, and the athletic trainer says, oh, did you know that she's gone to the co-rack and exercises outside of their training? And a soccer player with a hamstring injury who says rehab isn't helping, and very often the athletic trainer says, do you know that person is not coming in and doing their exercises? So all of this information makes you a better physician when you have the information that you may not get from anyone else other than the athletic trainer. Asking about the past is really good. And for those of you who think about work-life balance, that was a few years ago. That's my son with the Purdue baseball team. So athletic trainers have institutional memory. So whenever you start at a college, a high school, asking the athletic trainers, what's worked in the past? What have you liked or not liked about the physicians? You have medical consultants, you like or don't like. And I've had, an athletic trainer say, yeah, we sent this one girl to an OB-GYN who wasn't getting periods. And they just said, don't worry, it's normal for athletes. And I was like, oh, good to know. what has worked in the past from coaches' personalities, injury prevention, all of that. And then one way to really get the athletic trainer buy-in is to be very specific in your return to play plans, which is not saying you are telling the athletic trainer what to do, but to give them good guidelines so that they feel there's some support and they understand that you're on the same page. So here's an example. There's some guidelines if you don't have the knowledge too that are out there, but sport specific return to play following concussion. So maybe you're not as familiar with lacrosse, you don't really know all the stuff they do. Well, look this up, talk with your lacrosse athletic trainer and say, hey, does this make sense to you? Is this a good rubric to sort of understand what constitutes these steps for a return to play standpoint? And let's say you're seeing a bone stress injury and you're giving a treatment plan, a lot of us have semi-similar plans for a stress reaction, right? So boot or crutches, activity restriction, are you getting labs? Are you doing any referrals? But being specific in saying like, well, do you want to follow up in 2 weeks? Do you want to follow up when they're pain-free? Do you want the athletic trainer to just let you know how they're doing and you'll guide it that way and not need to see the athlete? So being as specific as possible is really going to help that team between the physician and athletic trainer give the best care. And then gaining the trust of the student athlete, right? So these are my patients, but gosh, I've learned so much from student athletes along the way and really became a better physician the more I'm willing to be flexible and not be stubborn and sort of learn as I go. So putting their actions into context, and I'm just going to give you guys examples of things I've been through, and they don't always paint me in the brightest light, but I think, again, we all need to just sort of be honest about some of our flaws. So there was an example of a Division II football student athlete who was sent to my clinic because I wasn't going to training room that week. And it was on a Wednesday. He had gotten a concussion the day before in practice. There wasn't really a question of whether it was a concussion or not from the athletic trainer, but he just wanted me to check out the athlete since he knew he was going to be missing that weekend's game. So I do my whole speech, I do my exam, and I start to talk about, return to play and return to learn and give some guidance. And he sort of interrupts me and goes, but what about Saturday? And in my head, I had already said he wasn't going to play. I thought, I don't know. So I was like, oh no, you're not playing Saturday. But then I moved on and he got up and stormed out of my office. And, of course I was just thinking gosh, that was pretty nice. He's, what's up with him? Why is he so grumpy? I explained it pretty well. And so I called the athletic trainer and said, yeah, I did my best, but he stormed out and he goes, I wish I could have talked to you before this, Carly. That kid's going through a lot. He's actually taking care of his 3-year-old niece because his sister just went to jail and he's got a lot going on otherwise. So that probably had nothing to do with you. And so just having that context, understanding that, collegiate student athletes aren't necessarily having the same college experience I had and may have some environmental issues going on that I'm not aware of. Ask, don't assume. Again, I think one example was I had this student athlete who had some cellulitis, it was pretty mild. I had written a prescription for cephalexin and sent it to the pharmacy, and this school athletics did not pay for those. So I followed up a week later, and his leg looked worse. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is looking worse. What's going on? And he said, oh yeah, I'm really sorry, Dr. Day, I didn't take the antibiotics yet. And I'm like, well, you didn't take the antibiotics. Why wouldn't you take them? I told you needed to take them. And he goes, oh yeah, I just wasn't able to pick them up. And instead of me taking a step back and saying oh, what was the barrier to picking them up? I said it was right down the street and they're cheap. They're only $10. And his response was, yes, again, I'm so sorry. I know I don't have $10 right now, but my dad is bringing some at the end of this week. I personally have never been in a situation where I didn't have $10 available to me at any point in time, but this athlete did. And I learned a lot about, again, understanding, where people are coming from and not assuming the reason for their lack of compliance with the plan. This is a big soapbox of mine that I'm about to talk about with student athlete trust. And it has to do with how you frame things. So I know we've all either as parents or had our parents say it's not what you say, but how you say it. But that's really important. And I think a lot of times in a sideline environment, we feel like we're really pressured to do things quickly. but the difference between like a 10-second or 20-second sentence are not really important in the game, but sometimes that little extra time that you take to explain something makes a difference. So a few examples I would give here is, let's say in game, you think you're going to offer an athlete medication, something like a prescription strength anti-inflammatory. If you just say, take this pill for your ankle, well, they're saying, oh, okay, yeah, I'm supposed to take this pill. That's what I'm supposed to do in this situation. Whereas if you just said, I feel it's safe for you to continue playing. Do you think you need medication to help your pain? And they can say yes or no. They say no. They're on their way. They say yes. Then you can explain the medication. And again, it's really like 10 extra words, but it's such a big difference in how you're providing an understanding to the athlete of what their options are and essentially giving them informed consent in a short period of time. Similarly, when it goes to playing through pain, I think we all assume all athletes are willing to push through everything, but they don't have to, right? And so the example I give here is, let's say an athlete has a fracture, has a cast, and you or the orthopedic surgeon has decided it is okay for them to play. Instead of just saying like, oh, you can keep playing. Great, right? This is great. And they're sitting there saying, okay, yeah, I have to keep playing. I have to keep playing. But maybe they're in a lot of pain. Maybe they feel like they need to take pain medication, like a narcotic, which they probably should not be playing on. And all you got to say is, sometimes with this injury, we will medically clear athletes to return to play. Are you comfortable playing with this injury, knowing the potential risks? Again, give them options. They say, yep, I'm ready to go. Then you say, great. Any questions? Or if they say, well, I'm not sure, or do you think it makes more sense to wait? Then, you can have a more detailed conversation with them. Being inclusive, I think, is very important. But the interesting part is if you have an inclusive mindset, but the athletes don't know that, it doesn't help because they might not know that you're someone that's trustworthy. So I actually have this rock that sits on my desk at work that I just think maybe an athlete sometime might see it, might think that I'm a friendly ear that they, are comfortable talking to, or it's a safe space. So being inclusive and then allowing people to know you are inclusive, I think is very important. Putting yourself in their shoes. So I have never been a collegiate football player. But, I look at my athletes and I think, gosh, within the football team, they are around a lot of people who may be culturally similar to them. But, at my university at Purdue, they can go to a class and maybe be the only person of their race in that class, or the only athlete in that class, or the only person from Texas in that class. And just thinking about how it might feel to them and how they might, that might make them uncomfortable going to class or some other situation in the community. And so here's some statistics for you. So this is within the NCAA, all divisions. So for student athletes, and this data is a year or two old, so student athletes are 64% white. Head athletic trainers are 90% white, and head team positions are 87% white. So it's possible that not only outside of athletics, but within athletics, there are student athletes who are not seeing themselves represented in their healthcare providers. It doesn't mean that I couldn't provide good care, but it means that I have to consider that maybe this person has thoughts about how I might perceive what they're saying. And then my get to know them, also known as actually care. So I think most people have a good BS detector. And so if you're in a phony way, just asking a couple questions about them to try to like pretend like you want to get to know them, I think they'll see through that versus, again, actually caring. And I rarely talk to my athletes about sports, right? So if it's relevant to their injury, fine. But if I see someone in the hallway, my question is, how's your sister doing? Did you get a chance to go back home last weekend? How was that philosophy class you're taking? Oh, have you painted any new? I had one guy who liked to draw pictures of cars. Have you drawn any new cars lately? Got any photos of it? And that's like, again, because I actually do care, but that's where they feel like, gosh, this person really is invested in me and doesn't see me as just an athlete. I think college athletes, especially these days with the transactional nature of college sports, are just sort of feel like a piece of meat sometimes. And when there's someone who demonstrates an actual interest in them, I think that really helps. Again, it's more fulfilling on my end, and then it also maybe gives them more trust when you're providing information or medical advice. Love this old photo of my son. So my summary is, for coaches, knowing the game, knowing the sport and demonstrating an interest in sport is going to get you a long way. with athletic trainers respecting their role, and with student athletes putting them first, giving them a voice, again, really helps you provide the best care. Okay, so that was the long part. Couple short thoughts. One is about building relationships. So that is a strength of mine. Some people might not be their strength and they'll think of some other way to sort of help them in their career. But for me, I'm just going to give you a few examples. So this is an example at AMSSM annual meeting last year. Got to meet some of our international colleagues. On the left there, there's Dr. Dane Vishnubala from the UK and Dr. Mark Fulcher. We're talking about concussions, about American football versus rugby, have a good conversation about it. And then Dane says, oh my gosh, would you be able to come to BASM and talk about American football? This is the British Association of Sports and Exercise Medicine. Talk about American football and how rule changes have affected concussion incidents. And I was like, oh my gosh, that would be great. So I go to the UK, give an international related talk, which was really a great experience. During that trip, he and I talked more. We talked about education of students. And then recently I got appointed as a visiting professor for the University of Leeds, where I'm going to actually teach his students and talk about some of my areas of passion, which includes, again, diversity of sports medicine providers, relative energy deficiency in sport, concussions, some of those topics. So that relationship has just sort of naturally led to some really great opportunities for me. This is another international example. So on the left there, this was at the AMSSM the year before, got to know some of our Japanese colleagues and was invited to give a talk in Japan, which in and of itself would have been a wonderful connection and experience. But what happened is when I was driving in a car with Dr. Yuka Sukahara, who's in the blue and white striped dress, we were talking about being moms and what's it like to be pregnant on the sideline, what's it like to be a pregnant physician, what it's like to give birth, postpartum. And it led to us creating a survey that we sent out internationally, and we got that published. That was great, right? So attitudes and opinions regarding female sports medicine physicians during pregnancy and the postpartum period. So that was really wonderful. And then I was writing a chapter on sleep in the athlete, got her to come in and help me write it. So that was really good. Then we took another part of our survey and looked at gender bias in sports medicine and our physician perception on interactions with athletes, coaches, and athletic trainers. So that was really interesting. Then we also did a study looking at physician-patient sex concordance when treating athletes. Then we wrote an editorial on some of these topics, giving our sort of opinions. And then I got to take my passion for sleep and work with her to validate the two main sleep questionnaires for athletes into Japanese. So we translated both of those in Japanese and then validated them. This is all, if you look at the dates, within like a 2-year period, 2-3-year period that we got all that done just based on a conversation we had during a car ride. All right, and then this is the shortest thing because it's the easiest. You just be the best version of yourself. And so I am someone who works hard, plays hard. People ask me about work-life balance, and I call it work-life integration. Some examples here. So upper left is me at the Final Four with Dr. Casiero, who at the time was the head team physician for UConn and is now the chief medical officer of the NCAA. In the bottom right, that's me with US Soccer, working with the venue medical officer in Colombia, but also have photos of me in Alaska, me at Valley of Fire State Park. This summer, I had the opportunity to go to Banff with my family and relax and unwind. And then I also spent a week at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Training Center in Colorado Springs, getting to work with Olympic and Paralympic athletes. So I think always just finding your passion, being true to yourself. I'm a pretty casual person. I like to joke a lot, but I really want to make sure my athletes get good care. And so I just lean into that. And I know when I'm happy and I'm not burned out, I'm going to provide the best care. So that's how I sort of live every day of my life. And so far it's worked out pretty well. And that's it. Got through that pretty quickly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Day. I'm wondering if, number one, if anyone has any questions, go ahead and throw your questions into the chat. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what maybe an important moment that kind of pushed you to go into sports medicine and kind of take the career path that you did.
Yeah, so I am someone who I just always love sports medicine. I could be in middle school watching NFL and someone gets hurt and they cut to commercial and I was like, no, what happened to that guy? So in high school, I was like a student athletic trainer, and I always wanted to go into orthopedics, but that's because that's all I knew. I just thought if you're a sports doctor, you go into orthopedics. So I spent a lot of time shadowing orthopedic surgeons in high school and college, and even early into medical school. And then I learned about PM&R because there was actually a soccer camp for kids with disabilities that was getting put on, and a physician was working it. And they asked if I, wanted to come, and it was like literally the greatest weekend I had ever done. Had so much fun and learned a little bit about PM&R, and then just researched a lot, and I was like, oh yeah, like that's what I really wanted. That was the thing that made the most sense to me and what I enjoyed. And so sort of made that shift from ortho to PM&R, and feel very happy about it, feel very satisfied.
I think that's not an uncommon story. I think I can relate to that a little bit as well in terms of the orthopedics and PM&R not being quite as well known. So I love hearing from all these physiatrists here tonight. Thank you so much, Dr. Day. And I'd like to turn things over now to Dr. Brendan Peer, who's going to introduce our panel.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Razor, Dr. Day, for giving that great talk to kind of kick off the night. I'm really excited for what the rest of the night has in store. We have four extremely talented, very accomplished sports and musculoskeletal medicine physicians who I have the pleasure of introducing now. And so the first is Dr. Jonathan Kirschner. I was fortunate enough to be one of his mentees. I just recently finished the HSS Sports and Spine Medicine Fellowship. So Dr. Kirschner was born and raised and currently resides in New York City. He is board certified in physical medicine and rehabilitation, sports medicine, electrodiagnostic medicine, and is a registered musculoskeletal sonographer. He completed residency at the Kessler Institute and fellowship training at orthopedic and spine specialist. He is currently an associate attending physiatrist at the Hospital for Special Surgery, where he serves as fellowship director for both the interventional spine and musculoskeletal medicine and sports medicine fellowships, and the associate director for the Center for Regenerative Medicine. He's an associate professor of clinical rehabilitation medicine at Weill Cornell Medical, where he teaches medical students and residents. He is co-editor of Atlas's Image-Guided Spinal Procedures, second edition, and Atlas of Ultrasound-Guided Musculoskeletal Injections. Next, we have Dr. Elizabeth Libby Brown. She is an attending physician at the Hospital for Special Surgery and the Department of Physiatry. She treats adults with a wide array of musculoskeletal conditions and has a special focus in pelvic health rehabilitation. She completed her residency training in PM&R and sports medicine fellowship at Shirley Ryan Ability Lab in Chicago, Illinois, where she provided coverage for Division I athletes at Northwestern University. She has also provided coverage for the U.S. Deaf Women's National Soccer Team. Prior to medical school, she served as a volunteer for the Peace Corps in Ethiopia, which started her on the path to medicine. Most importantly, she is the mother of two boys who have inspired her to combine an interest in sports medicine and pelvic health as part of her career. Next, we have Dr. Melody Hrubes, who is a physiatrist and medical director of the Performing Arts Collaborative at Hospital for Special Surgery. She is board certified in PM&R as well as sports medicine. She currently serves as lead medical for Team USA Breaking, team position coordinator for the United States Soccer Federation U17 Women's National Team, medical director for the Radio City Rockettes, and works with multiple Broadway shows and dance companies. She has experience with broad-based musculoskeletal injuries with particular interest in injury prevention and biomechanical rehabilitation in athletes, performing artists, endurance sports, and female athletes. Dr. Hrubes serves on the board of directors for AMSSM and is president of the Performing Arts Medicine Association. She is co-chair for the Dance USA Task Force on Dancer Health Executive Committee and a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine. And last but definitely not least, we have Dr. Robert Bowers, who is a sports medicine physician at Emory in Atlanta, Georgia. Prior to medicine, Dr. Bowers played Division I college baseball at Furman University and attended graduate school at Auburn University, where he received a Master of Education in Exercise Science and a PhD in Exercise Physiology. Dr. Bowers earned his medical degree at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, Georgia campus. He completed his residency training in physical medicine and rehabilitation at Emory, where he served as chief resident and completed a sports medicine fellowship there as well. His current clinical and research interests include baseball medicine and throwing athletes, diagnostic and interventional ultrasound, and orthobiologics. Specifically, Dr. Bowers is interested in neurogenic thoracic outlet syndrome and peripheral nerve conditions in throwing athletes and platelet-poor plasma treatment for muscle injuries. Dr. Bowers is the director of the Emory Baseball Medicine Program and serves as a team physician for Georgia Tech Baseball, the Atlanta Braves, and the College Park Skyhawks. Like I said, we're extremely excited to hear what all these great physicians have to say, and we'll have a Q&A panel after they each give a brief presentation. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Jonathan Kirschner to start the panel. And once again, thank you for everyone for participating.
Thanks so much, Brendan, and thanks to the AAP and AMSSM for having me. I don't have any slides, but I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. So, similar to Dr. Day, I was always fascinated by sports and athletics. I always played sports when I was younger. I was actually a gymnast and a bowler in high school. I developed my own medical issues, and the fellows always like to make fun because most of the injuries you saw in clinic, I tended to have at one point or another. I developed back pain, and it basically limited how much I could participate in sport. I also thought perhaps I'd be an orthopedic surgeon because I thought that was the only way to practice sports medicine. I didn't even know PM&R was a thing until I think my third year of medical school. But when I figured out, that PM&R existed and I could do non-operative sports medicine, I could help athletes, but also, help people in pain and treat spinal injuries, I thought it was the perfect, mix for me. So I pursued residency in PM&R, and then I did a combined fellowship in both spine and sports medicine. And my practice now is really broad. I enjoy treating athletes of all types, both old and young, regardless of their condition. I teach and do spinal procedures. I also do a lot of ultrasound and general musculoskeletal health and sports medicine. I've been a team physician for USA Soccer, and I've traveled with the beach soccer team, which has been a great experience. I also served as the head team physician for St. Peter's University. Now mainly I'm doing more teaching and seeing athletes sort of in an outpatient setting. I do research as well. I serve as the associate director for regenerative medicine, and to me, research is really important. My interest in research came from patients asking me the question like, "Hey doc, my shoulder hurts. Do you think PRP would help?" And my answer was, "I don't know, but let's do some research on it." So I tend to focus on procedural outcomes, regenerative medicine, PRP, with a specific interest in shoulder and shoulder arthritis. Um, to me, I always want to be the most well-rounded physician. I want to be able to treat any, any athlete really from head to toe, regardless of their complaint. To me, being a good medicine doc, it's hard to ignore the spine because the spine is sort of, the core of everything. And I really try to integrate the spine aspects and the sports medicine aspects. I'm looking a lot at the kinetic chain, how patients are moving, looking at their biomechanics, and that has, a lot of relevance regardless of what their chief complaint is. And when we focus on rehabilitation, even if they have a hip, knee problem, shoulder problem, a lot of times we're looking at the core and the spine, and that may be the heart of where their issues are. So I'm happy to go on more, but I'll save time for questions for the other panelists. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Dr. Kirschner. I'll turn it over to Dr. Libby Brown, please.
Thank you, Brendan. Can you hear me okay?
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. I was very excited to be on this panel. I'm just finishing up, or will almost be 1 year into my first year as an attending, so very fresh out of the whole fellowship experience, which for me has defined a lot thus far. Just to provide a little bit more background, I was a collegiate athlete. I played squash. So I was always in love with sports, and it is definitely essential to who I am as a person outside of medicine. And, luckily I just also enjoyed the sports medicine aspect of sports as well. So I kind of always knew I wanted to do a sports medicine fellowship. I thought, when I was choosing what specialty to go through, PM&R was an amazing field, as we all know. And that was kind of the path I set myself on. So I started residency. I had my first kid 6 weeks into intern year. My goal postpartum was to get back in shape by trying a triathlon, which I hadn't done before. Unfortunately, it was the pandemic, so I couldn't do that. So I basically had no guidance postpartum with how to kind of return to sport and exercise. started residency, kind of progressed, and definitely knew I wanted to do sports medicine fellowship. So headed down that track, had my second kid end of PGY3, and then started the fellowship interview process. And that time I actually had way more dedicated perinatal care. And so as I'm going through residency, I'm getting more exposure to pelvic health, and I'm deciding to go into sports medicine. And this is kind of what started to kickstart my interest in blending pelvic health and sports medicine. So I think the biggest turning point for me, or one of a few, was kind of deciding what I wanted out of a fellowship, knowing that I had this interest in pelvic health and that I wanted to pursue sports. So really starting to kind of build my narrative as to what I wanted to be and what fellowships I was going to look into and what they kind of had to offer was one big step. And then actually kind of during my fellowship interview process, I built the confidence to kind of say like what I really wanted in my fellowship. And maybe that sounds silly to say, but in PM&R, there's a huge amount of spine care that's like very central to what we do and what we offer, and it's very important. And I do love spine care, but I felt this growing feeling inside me that I just maybe wasn't the person to go learn how to do spine injections and throw myself into that. And so I actually struggled with that a lot, kind of saying, no, maybe I don't want to focus as much on spine, but I really love pelvic health. How do I make this part of my experience? And so when it came to choosing a fellowship, this was another big turning point for me. I ultimately chose a fellowship where I felt like I had the flexibility to pursue my interests and also the resources. So I think I just happened to be in the right place at the right time in Chicago, because a lot of pelvic health rehab was born out of the Rehab Institute of Chicago, Northwestern, Shirley Ryan Ability Lab. So I had mentors there who I knew I could learn a lot from if I stayed there. So it was actually halfway through my fellowship year that I told my fellowship director that I didn't want to do fluoro anymore, and he was, totally fine with that. Felt probably a bigger deal to me than him. And then I started spending once a day, a week, if not more, in clinic with one of our pelvic health specialists. Then I get to interviewing, and honestly, everyone was open to pelvic health. And I ended up, signing with HSS, which was an amazing decision. I'm very happy to be where I am. Again, there's flexibility to do what I want. So I think when I reflect back on the different avenues that I took, the main thing that stands out to me was just making the decision to pursue interest in a topic that really felt important to me. And I felt like I could contribute to our specialty by exploring more pelvic health, which I have so much to learn, but that is kind of my journey. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Dr. Brown. Those are incredible insights, I think, for all of us. Like I said, we'll have a Q&A at the end. I think that just as a reminder to people, if they have questions, just so they don't forget, just to go ahead and throw their questions into the chat, and then we'll be kind of curating the chat function to make sure that we address as many questions as we can at the end of the panel. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Dr. Hrubes to share some of her thoughts and perspective.
Hi, my name is Melody Hrubes. I am a sports medicine physiatrist at Hospital for Special Surgery. And Brendan already said all the stuff, so I'll kind of keep that going. But it's an honor to be here, and I'm available if you guys ever want to send me an email later. But I have no disclosures. In terms of the team physician, I did primary care sports medicine fellowship in Chicago at the University of Illinois at Chicago. And there we were actually part of the family medicine department. So while I was a fellowship director of sports medicine, I also was primary director or primary teacher for 9 residencies and at UIC. So I also got to work with emergency medicine and orthopedic surgery and pediatrics and all of those other groups that we work with on a daily basis, but got to teach them why physiatry and why physiatry musculoskeletal medicine was such a great member of their team. So I wanted them to always want to look to physiatry as a great resource. And what I found is when people would rotate with me, they would send me their partners or their parents or their roommates. And that told me that this was a need that a lot of people have, and they just didn't know how to access it because these were people in medicine who weren't utilizing the skills that we have. While I was at UIC, I was a physician, not the head team physician, but a team physician at UIC, which was Division I. It was not Purdue Division I like Carly. It was actually it was called the Horizon League. We had over 400 athletes, but there wasn't a lot of scrutiny. There wasn't a lot of television time. Our athletes didn't think that they would be going pro. So while they were student athletes like they are at Purdue, they sort of knew that they needed to also kind of have an afterlife. So it was kind of a great way to get to know people in a time in their life that they knew was transient. And I really got to build my skills because my clinic was in the athletes' exercise training area. So like anytime there was an injury, they just bring them on down. So I got sideline training for 400 athletes on a daily basis. And so with Chicago, it was a very collegial environment. So I got to help cover the Chicago Marathon and dance companies. And I had time as a young attending to go to a bunch of conferences where I kept learning and kept building my relationships with people. And so I just kept listening and learning. I did AAP PM&R, I did AMSSM, ACSM, the Performing Arts Medicine Association. I volunteered for committees. I changed my clinic days so that I could work with attendees that were really good teachers because I knew I wasn't where I needed to be knowledge-wise, and I wanted to feel comfortable asking questions. And people were really generous about that. But I think it's really important to be humble and realize when you still need an expert to weigh in. 6 years ago in 2019, my husband is an attorney and he was asked to move to New York. And I said, no way. I love Chicago, but we ended up moving to New York and I was on board. And so I left the diamond of Chicago and I moved over to New York. And while I was in Chicago, I had an opportunity to cover US gymnastics and go to some of their world events and some of their world championships with their trampoline and tumbling team. But I kept working with Broadway groups that had come through the city. And the thing about that is it's a small world. So they were, a lot of those people that traveled through Chicago were also based in New York. So they were super excited when we built this relationship and I was in New York now. And so part of that was the Radio City Rockettes were interested in having a medical director. So I moved to an orthopedics group called Rothman in New York, which is no longer here, but it was a wonderful opportunity with a lot of great physicians. I was the only non-surgeon of the group at the time. So we were able to really all work together. And because I was the only non-surgeon by default, I was the director of non-operative sports medicine in the New York region, which sounds impressive when you realize I was directing myself. But I didn't tell people that. I was like, oh yeah, I totally deserve this title. But it was great to be the medical director of the Radio City Rockettes because that gave me an entree into all of these other performing arts groups. And soccer during that time wanted to keep me on as a network team physician, which I had offered to step down from because I thought that they would want to only have Chicago physicians. So that was a really great opportunity to stay at the national level. So I moved really carefully when I moved to New York. There are a lot of really great physicians that are already here. So while I did get some really good opportunities with musicals and with soccer, I was careful to make sure that anytime I saw a patient that had seen another physician, I didn't speak poorly of that. I tried to understand what had been done beforehand. And while we might be changing the plan, I wanted to always speak with respect and move with respect and with regard to that, because sports medicine and primary care sports medicine and performing arts sports medicine, they're very small worlds. So I wanted to make sure that I was cognizant of that and I wasn't burning bridges that I didn't know existed. Because when you move into a new space, you don't have a lot of context. So you want to make sure you're not making a misstep and not realizing what's happening. So as as things kind of moved along, I became the team physician coordinator for the U17 women's national team, which means I get to sort of plan the physicians who travel and get to bring up new and young physicians, which is a really great opportunity. And then more Broadway shows and other dance companies started to reach out. So I got to be the medical director for them. And then I continued my organizational involvement because it grew me so much. I learned so much with all of these different groups in different ways. So with AMSSM, instead of just attending, Carly, Dr. Day gave me the opportunity to be the liaison to AAP PM&R. And then I was on the program planning committee, and then I became the moderator of moderators, and then became on the board of directors. And for ACSM, I would always do the clinical case slides because I knew that was really important to learning. Or for PAMA, I offered to be the education chair. I just wanted to be in the room and try to be involved. Oh, I didn't play my little. And one time, I always joke when I say that I wanted to be in the room. This is the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Just like when they say, do you want to come? You always just say yes. So they're like, Dr. Rubish, do you want to come help us on Thanksgiving morning? Of course, I want to be there with you guys. While you do that, you want to build that brand and be kind of the person that people go to, but you also have to do the work. So it's fun to get to tell you guys what I do, but for hours and hours every day. And just the other night, I was at a theater where I was shadowing one of the stage managers for 3 hours. And while you love that, it's a grind, and you just have to continue to get better and do the work every day and become super knowledgeable and learn the vocabulary, as Carly mentioned earlier. And now let's see. When Dr. Finoff called, there was the USA breaking. So I think for those of us who are team docs, the pinnacle is US, the Olympics. And so there was actually, as you guys probably remember from 2024 summer, there was the breaking was part of France for the first time. And so Dr. Finoff was like, I need a person who understands high level sports. And I had that with soccer, but also somebody who understands performing arts and dance. And so he tasked me to be a part of this. And I tell everybody, it was so hard. So I thought I was prepared. I thought I knew what I was doing, and I had no idea. And I learned so much. And again, people were very generous with their time. And I got to know these amazing athletes who had never been on that world stage. So we were sort of all learning together, but they didn't know how to be an elite athlete. So trying to work with them and show them and be that resource for them was a huge privilege, but it was a ton of work. So now I work at the Hospital for Special Surgery, and I'm the medical director for the Performing Arts Medicine Collaborative, but I still get to take care of these shows. I take care of over 21 Broadway shows now, and I'm still working with Team USA for soccer because I learned so much about high-level care from them, and I can take that back. So that's it. This is my email if you would like to touch base. And this is Kodiak. He's my dog, and this is his happy place in Maine. I'll stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Dr. Rubish. Pretty remarkable hearing just the breadth of experiences that you have from both the coverage perspective and clinical perspective. So really awesome to hear. Just again, I'll repeat myself for people who may be coming a little bit late, but if you have any questions for the panel, feel free to just shoot a couple questions into the chat. And right now, I think I'll hand it over to Dr. Bowers, who's joined us, and we'll hand it over to him to share his thoughts and perspective.
All right, everyone. Robby Bowers, PM&R Sports Medicine, Emory in Atlanta. Thanks for having me. Dr. Reiser texted me and said that we were way ahead of schedule, so I rushed from giving my kids dinner down here. So let me get all my thoughts together. So I put together a couple slides. They tasked me with talking about being a physician scientist, and I would say that I'm not necessarily a physician scientist in that. I'm a full-time clinician. I do some research basically on my own time, among other things, between covering a bunch of teams and serving as associate program director for the fellowship. And so research is just a small part of what I do, but I can talk about research from a real world perspective, not as a true physician scientist that, so yeah, I have a PhD, but we'll go through kind of what my story is with that. But real world doing research. I'm in the clinic 5 days a week, teaching and seeing patients and doing admin work and covering teams, and so research is part of it. And so if research is something that you're interested in, then you just have to find time to do it. And it's not, it's just one of those things where if you're interested in it, you'll find time for it. If not, it's not, that's just not your thing. So it's not a big deal, but you do need to be good with your time and time management to be able to produce research while you're doing all of these other things. And so here's kind of a little bit about my story here. This is my background. So after undergrad, I went to Auburn University to basically to be a college professor. So I majored in exercise science at Furman University in South Carolina, and I wanted to be a college professor. So I went to Auburn to get my PhD, and along the way, I kind of felt like the research world wasn't for me, the full-time, publish or perish and applying for grants and those sorts of things. It just wasn't my thing. And there was a lot of drama in academia, and it just, again, wasn't my thing. And so I kind of got interested in medicine along the way. And so, yeah, I got my PhD, but I did not get my PhD as part of an MD PhD program to be a physician scientist. Mine was, I got my PhD and then realized that wasn't really the world for me. And so then I went to med school after that. And so that's kind of the background that I'm coming from. So I went to the Georgia campus of PCOM, and then you see kind of what I did after that. I've been at Emory since then for PM&R residency and sports fellowship, and have been on staff there since I finished fellowship in 2018. Last year, I started as APD of the fellowship program, and then if any of y'all know my background, baseball is a huge part of it. And so I do a lot with baseball medicine. And so these are my team affiliations at this point. I go everything from high school to NCAA Division III, NCAA Division I, professional minor leagues with the G League, and then professional big leagues with the Braves in Major League Baseball. So I do a lot, between being in clinic, and then I cover a lot of sports and, after hours too. And so where does the time come to do research? And that's where, I think you just have to decide if it's something that you want to do and be part of your career, you find time to do it. If there are questions that you want to answer, if you think these questions are things that would help other people that are within your world, then, research is something that's probably up your alley. This is kind of my path to PM&R sports medicine, and this picture on the right is legitimately after my last college baseball game, when I just kind of took a knee on the side of the field as they were dragging it for the conference tournament game afterwards, and just kind of was just sitting around and kind of being like, dang, like I was a very mediocre college baseball player, and so that was the end of the road for me. And my dad kind of just took this picture of me, kind of candid picture, and you're looking out and just kind of like, I love this game of baseball, but this is it for me. So where's my career going to take me, and how are you going to stay involved? And you don't really know where your career is going to take you. And so this is 2006, and by 2021, I'm here at the World Series in Houston with the Braves when they win a World Series. And so I joke around that I tell my dad when I was growing up that I was going to make the big leagues. It just so happened I made the big leagues as a doctor and not as a player. So but you never know where your career is going to take you. And part of me going from being a college baseball player and wanting to always be involved in the game to, helping to cover a team and being there for the World Series. Part of that is just being at the right place at the right time and luck. I've been blessed to be at the right place at the right time at certain points. And so this was certainly probably the highlight of my career to this point. Here's in the locker room afterwards with the World Series trophy and spraying champagne with all the players. So you never know, but in order, yeah, you got to be in the right place at the right time. But I also feel like a lot of hard work went in between that time frame of me finishing my baseball career and getting to this point. And that's kind of what we'll talk about at this point. So like I said, I'm a full-time clinician, and I've been tasked with talking about research and, how do you do research while also being a full-time clinician? And I think part of this is choose, as you're coming through residency and coming through med school, you have to choose the right mentors. And I'm not a person that ascribes to having a mentor assigned to you. You have to, find a person that you gel with and get along with, and your personalities get along, and you have the same interests. And so finding the right mentors that can coach you into kind of the clinician and coach you into the career that you want. And so early on in my career, I linked Jason Zaremski has a great interest in baseball, just like I did, and I linked up with him, and he's been an outstanding mentor to me as far as being able to contribute to research while also being a good clinician and covering sports and trying to pay it forward a bit. So to the learners that are out there, residents and fellows, just go seeking out mentors that can help you and get you to the career that you want to have. And then also you have to, regardless of what you do, nothing's going to be handed to you. You have to hustle and you have to put in the effort. You have to look for opportunities to build the career that you want. So I always knew that I wanted to do sports medicine. I didn't necessarily know what path. In medical school, I found PM&R, and that kind of seemed like the best path for me, the most musculoskeletal training on the non-surgical side of things, which is what I wanted to do. I wasn't really interested in ortho. And so, I chose that path. And then I knew that I wanted to be involved in baseball in some point, and in some capacity. And so baseball medicine, just like Melody said, with the performing arts world, baseball medicine, it's a small community and people know each other. And it's just about seeking out the right people that can help to get you into the positions where you want to be. So you have a special niche interest within sports medicine, then go after it and look for the people that also have that interest, and see if you can link up with them and get their help for you to try to get to the career that you want to have. And you want to also put yourself into a position to succeed. And so you have to do your background work. And so whether that's getting involved in research while you're a resident or a fellow in not just any research project, but look for projects that answer questions that you want to answer or are part of a field that you want to be a part of. It's not just something to put on your CV, like really do something that's something you're interested in and a question that you want to answer, so that it can help you get to the point in your career where you want to be. Again, like I said, choosing the right mentors, reaching out and asking about opportunities, whether that is sports coverage opportunities or opportunities within organizations like AAP or AAP-M&R or AMSSM. It's really just trying to open doors for yourselves and reaching out, and you're not being annoying. It's you're trying to create the career that you want for yourself. And also, if you're in residency and you're looking for a fellowship program, you want to look for a fellowship program that has what can offer you what you want to do. And so whether that is a faculty member there or a certain sport that you can cover or research opportunities that are there, certainly you can't choose the fellowship program you want to go to, but you can certainly throw your interest out there. And so just do your background work, whether it's a mentor or a program, and hustle and try to get those opportunities that will help you get to the career that you want. And like I said, just being at the right place at the right time, and luck sometimes comes into it as far as finding the career that you want. And then, for when it comes to research, it's about, like I said, it's finding the topics that really interest you and thinking of questions that you would like to answer. And not, these aren't projects that a lot of us can do as full-time clinicians. We can't do a lot of large-scale NIH-funded randomized controlled trials. That's not what my research career has been. My research, quote-unquote research career has been a lot of review papers, chart reviews, database reviews for patient-reported outcomes, and that research still has merit and can still help you to answer questions and can help other clinicians that are out there. And so my goal with the research that I put out is not just putting out research for the sake of putting it out. It's really to try to put stuff out that I think that answers a meaningful question or is going to help other clinicians in their daily practices. And so when you look at the type of research projects that I do, if I can kind of come through here, there is throwing athletes. And we see throwing athletes and thoracic outlet syndrome. Thoracic outlet syndrome is a niche that I've found myself I've fallen into through my interest in baseball medicine and throwing athletes. Thoracic outlet syndrome is 3 times more likely to happen in the throwing athlete. And I've fallen into that and have found great colleagues there, and it's become a huge part of my practice. And so your interest in particular subjects may lead you to down a different path that than you saw for yourself. And this has become something of a great interest to me. And you just can't foresee where you're going to go. And so my interest in the game of baseball has led me to taking care of a lot of patients with thoracic outlet syndrome, which are some of the most rewarding patients that I get to take care of, and has been a big avenue for me to take care of professional athletes with this pathology that there aren't a lot of specialists around the country, especially specialists around the country that are within my area and kind of the non-surgical physiatry sports medicine world. And then here's more of our thoracic outlet syndrome research. And, this is a study, this is a patient-reported outcome study. And so we have a diagnostic algorithm that we use to diagnose thoracic outlet syndrome. And we have a more minimally invasive surgical procedure that a colleague of mine that I work closely with, Eric Wagner, does. And we collect those patient-reported outcomes, and it helps to confirm that the diagnostic algorithm that we have developed at Emory really, our surgical outcomes show us that the diagnostic algorithm that we've put together is helpful and useful and helps to determine that patients are going to do well with certain surgeries, especially our more minimally invasive one. And so this, again, is the kind of research that I want to do is we try to answer a question and put out patient outcomes to show and help clinicians that, hey, there's a different way to take care of this pathology. And so these are the types of projects that I'm trying to do. And you also see these other things, a lot of focused reviews or review papers that have not been done yet. We're not just recreating another review. It's what is a question that you have that maybe a review paper has not been done. And these review, especially these narrative reviews and even systematic reviews, are not big, difficult projects to do. They take some time, but it's something that's relatively easy to do this work and put out these papers without having to take a huge chunk of your time away from being a clinician or a resident or a fellow. So same things with the elbow injuries and throwing athletes paper here. And again, so beyond my interest, I've been able to do baseball medicine and thoracic outlet research, but also have interest in ultrasound and orthobiologics, like a lot of us within this world. And I've developed, specific interests within the orthobiologics world. And this is one of them. And it's kind of one of my primary clinical interests at this point too. And it's a lesser known subset of orthobiologics. And we're doing projects and collecting patient reported outcomes and writing review papers on this topic as well. So these are, also things that you can do. Again, just chart reviews, collecting patient reported outcomes, just keeping your outcomes in a database, review papers. These are all projects that are, in the big scheme of things with research, fairly easy to do, and research that you can put out as a full-time clinician. And then again, this is just from an interest in ultrasound and specifically an interest in peripheral nerve ultrasound. Again, some review papers that we're doing. So review papers, this is one that had not been in the literature recently. And so we put it out. And so again, it's finding questions and finding topics that has not recently been in the literature and putting out review papers or simple kind of clinical outcomes papers that can be easy for us to do. So with that said, that was a little bit of rambling, but tried to answer questions as far as just what got me to my point in my career, what kind of tidbits or high yield points can I pass along to others to try to kind of push you to pursue whether it's a niche career or just PM&R sports medicine to push you to get to that career. And then also how, as a full-time clinician, not necessarily as a physician scientist with a 50-50 clinical and research time, how you can put out meaningful and I think relevant research while also being a full-time clinician. So with that said, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bowers. Really appreciate you sharing your insights here. And thank you to everyone on the panel. It's really, I know I don't speak just for myself, saying it's incredibly valuable to kind of hear all your perspectives, to share your breadth and depth of experiences is really impressive and inspiring to myself, and I'm sure a lot of other people on the call. So again, thanks for sharing your perspective. I will take, I'll hand it over to Dr. Libby, not to be confused with Dr. Libby Brown. But we have kind of some questions that were submitted by some of the people who registered for the talk tonight that we'll try to incorporate. Thank you for people who are now sending some of the questions into the chat. We'll try to get to as many of those as we can. But I'll turn it over to Dr. Libby to kind of kick off our what should be a very rich and informative Q&A here.
Thank you, my friend. And thank you so much, just like Dr. Pierre just mentioned, on behalf of the AMSSM's PM&R Education Subcommittee, co-hosting this with AAP. We want to thank everyone for coming, and we really wanted to just highlight all of the amazing things that we can do as PM&R physicians who specialize in sports medicine. And so like Dr. Pierre mentioned, now we have an awesome opportunity with our amazing panel that we got to hear from today to open Q&A. First question I'd like to just start off with, as we're getting things into the chat is, if you guys could just kind of talk about what your clinical lives look like, just day to day. Do you work Monday through Friday, 8 to 5? Do you see new patients all day, follow-up days? Do you have procedure days? And maybe some of you have fluoro days, and maybe some of you have ultrasound days. And I'll just let you all take your own turns and go whenever you want, or whoever wants to answer.
Sure, I I can start. I have one academic day because I'm the fellowship director and my admin roles in regenerative medicine. So I'm otherwise seeing patients 4 days a week. I have 2 dedicated half days for fluoroscopy procedures. And then I mix ultrasound and EMG into my daily, practice. I'm probably doing ultrasounds on maybe, half of the patients I see. Basically anything that's not a spine problem, I'm probably ultrasounding throughout the day and doing various ultrasound guided procedures, either diagnostic or injection.
Thanks, Dr. Kirschner.
Right, I can go and keep with the order, but I see patients similar 8 to 5 and 4.5 days per week with half day of admin time per our contract. And as of now, I'm mixing all of my, I say MSK patients and my pelvic health patients. I think as I build my practice, my goal will be to have days when I see my pelvic rehab patients and then days when I see my musculoskeletal medicine patients. I do ultrasound guided procedures, pelvic floor injections, no fluoro, trying to get more like a half day or more where I do my ultrasound procedures. And then I will add that as part of this journey of building my pelvic health interest, I have spent a lot of time this first year meeting with pelvic floor physical therapists, driving to their offices, having them to my office, going to OB/GYN practices, meeting with urologists, gastroenterologists as well. So that's also a piece of the puzzle, I would say.
I'll just keep going with what Libby did, keep going. So I'm also 4.5 days a week in clinic, but that's 95% of those patients are performing artists. So that's sort of, I'm just doing that work all the time. And I don't do fluoro, so all of my procedures are ultrasound guided. I do steroid, viscosupplementation, and PRP, and I just pepper those in, and my team knows how to not do them back to back, but I'll do anywhere from 5 to 12 a day. I see about 25 patients per day. And then in the evenings, 3 to 4 evenings a week, I am at a show or working some type of performance. And then once I have one weekend where I do that day, and then I've negotiated with my husband that Sunday nights are family time.
That's great.
I'll go. So I have 2 half days a week, and so three full days, 2 half days, and that's just as part of one. When I took over as one of the program directors this past year, I got a separate admin day just to do fellowship stuff. So 3 full days, 2 half days. My clinic days, I'll see about 20 patients a day, I think, on average. And mine's dominated by basically every patient I see is ultrasound. So I don't do any fluoro, all ultrasound. Lots of kind of niche ultrasound guided procedures with a lot of peripheral nerve and thoracic outlet stuff. Thoracic outlet is quickly becoming almost like half of my practice. So between throwing athletes and thoracic outlet, that takes up a lot of it, and then other just general musculoskeletal sports stuff. And I don't have a specific procedure day. Mine are kind of mixed in. Most patients I see in a day are getting some form of injection. I would say I see very few patients that it's just, I see them like I'll still see some fractures mixed in, things like that. But a lot of them are the patients that I see that are procedural. I use ultrasound guided injections to make a lot of my diagnoses. So I'll see a lot of patients that are referred for kind of tough cases that, we use ultrasound guided injections to make the diagnosis. And so, and then from a procedure standpoint, and then for my longer procedures that I know, like orthobiologic procedures, I have at least 2 of those, like extended visits every day for orthobiologic procedures too.
I can comment on my day. My day is probably the most odd. So I just take care of collegiate student athletes. I don't do student health. I don't do community clinics. I don't take care of club athletes. So my office is in our basketball arena within our sports medicine center. And it's sort of like half day training room, half day admin every day, but there's a mix. I go out to practices during the day when I have time. I have a good number of meetings with administrators, with the Big Ten, with the NCAA. I do all of our labs. I do all of our eating disorders, all of our iron deficiency and vitamin D labs, stock our pharmacy. So I just have a lot of mixed roles. And then I cover a lot of sports. Main coverage would be women's soccer, wrestling, men's basketball. Used to do football, don't do that anymore. But then I'll also cover Big Ten swim and dive meets or whatever we happen to be hosting, and on call for other events like baseball and softball.
Great, awesome. And many of the individuals listening in on tonight's event are like medical students, fellows, residents, people applying to fellowship in early career. So another question I want to bring up from the chat is, can you talk about your early career and how you were able to continue to be involved in sports medicine, especially if you were not able to find a sports medicine job right after coming out of fellowship?
I mean, I can jump in. I worked for a very little known, I don't even know if it's Division 3, but whatever's lower than Division 3 school, and really it was just to get involved, to show my face, to get some hands-on experience. But I tried to see all comers regardless of chief complaint, the age of the patient, the type of pathology. I wanted a broad skill set, and that's what I sought in my training and fellowship. So I tried to see as many, diverse people as possible. And then as I had more experience, I started to be known maybe for certain conditions or certain procedures. But I think, having a broad skill set is helpful. And then, you can always drill down and become an expert like a lot of the folks on the panel are. But I think there's value, to having broad training, and you can still be good at what you do and see a lot of different things. You don't just have to be like the left wrist doctor. Although if you want to be great, you'll be really good at it. So I think there's value to both of that. But, be available, saying yes to opportunities. When I was asked to cover something or work for a certain club, I wasn't getting paid to do it, but I did it, just to show interest. And like a lot of folks were saying, being involved in, national organizations, committees, that's where you get involved. You make good networking and connections. Like Dr. Brown was saying, reaching out when you're first starting, meeting different doctors, different specialists, not just orthopedic surgeons, physical therapists, folks in the community. I would give talks at the local Y, things like that. To really make yourself known is really helpful.
I agree with the community talks as well. I feel like that's such an important piece of what we do to be able to really enmesh ourselves in the place where we're working. And I've been able to do that as well, and I think that's a great way to connect. For US soccer coverage, that actually started in fellowship, and then it just so happens that the person who oversees the extended national teams is one of my colleagues who works in Connecticut, and so I was able to kind of continue working for that team, which has been amazing. But yeah, I think it's a lot about just keeping your eyes and ears open and um, as an early career physician currently, uh, I think just what Dr. Kirschner said, I am trying to see pretty much everything that comes through my door. And there are days when I see a patient and I don't feel totally comfortable. And that's part of, I think, this journey of starting medicine. Like becoming an attending has been a big step. And I'm just so grateful that I'm have come from a fellowship where I had incredible mentors who I reach out to, and then also landed somewhere where I have colleagues who I can continue to reach out to. So definitely think about those connections as well as your support system kind of going forward.
Um, I'd like to piggyback on that and mention I'm a big fan of positive feedback. So when nobody walks through my door without me knowing how they found me. So you don't know who your like patient influencer is, who's going to send you 5 family members. And if they send you somebody and they come back and you can say, if you happen to send me that elbow, I really appreciated that. That was a great fit. I was really happy to help with that. Same thing with physical therapists. And I think primary care doctors are a great resource because if they don't have a lot of musculoskeletal training, and I try to use that phrase musculoskeletal instead of sports medicine, because then they think you should just see 14-year-old baseball players. And you're like, I'm not Dr. Bowers. But you can see the 45-year-old who's trying to run an ultra, or somebody who just is trying to get back into the gym and their personal trainer might have pushed them a little hard. So if you can be a safe space for those referral networks like primary care docs and say, hey, if whatever you want to send me that's musculoskeletal, send it to me. And if I'm not the person, I'll get them to the right person. And you'll make sure that they know, I'm so glad you're here. I'm not your long-term person. And then you build that two-way referral network, the primary care docs and then the surgeons who don't want things. And then you're getting that from both ways in addition to the patients themselves. And that builds so quickly that you end up turning away 5 to 10 patients a day within a few years.
Yeah, I definitely agree with when you are out in the community, especially early on, trying to get patients and get your name out there, saying musculoskeletal instead of sports. Because if you just say sports, then you're going to drive away. Even now, I'll get 50-year-old people come in. They're recreational tennis players. They're fit and they're active, and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that you're seeing me. You're a sports medicine doctor," and I'm like, "No, you fit in perfectly with what we're trying to see." And so I do agree with saying that. And I'd say for those that are in their early career and for current fellows or those that are going to be fellows, like there are very few perfect jobs that are out there. There are very few academic high level sports jobs that you're going to get right out of fellowship. Sure, there are some, but for most of these, like Dr. Brown is saying, like you take a job and you have to hustle. Like even with me being at Emory and we take care of a lot of sports, I was the bottom of the barrel. I mean, I was starting out at clinics an hour outside of the city and not involved with most of the teams. And I would see anything that would walk through the door. And I think you just have to put your head down at first and try not to get dissatisfied or dissuaded and just try to do a good job. And if you do a good job, you're slowly going to work your way up. And I, at this point am now only in clinics that are like our main clinics. I'm out, I don't work in those kind of satellite clinics anymore. I'm involved with some of the biggest teams. I've kind of worked my way up to being up in the fellowship program and having the fellows. And so at first you just have to realize that regardless of the job that you have is just try to do a good job. And if you do a good job, you're going to, work your way up. And so try not to get too caught up in you having the perfect job right off the bat. It's just take the job that you at that time works best for you and do a good job and try some of the things I talked about. Just hustle and try to stay involved. And even if you take a job that's not, you don't get to take care of the sport that you really want to take care of, stay involved through research or through some of the professional organizations and that will help you stay within that world so that when the right opportunity does come about that you're ready to jump at it.
Yeah, and when I started, I was giving talks at running stores. I was just sort of offering youth soccer teams if they wanted me to come out and give a talk to parents. I would, do whatever I needed to do. And I agree with Robby, you know, my goal is just to be the best at whatever I was doing. So if I'm a high school team position, I'm gonna be the best high school team position that school's ever had and show them a lot of attention and do a good job. And I guarantee doing a good job has never hurt me throughout my career. It has never harmed my ability to move on to other opportunities.
Well said, everyone. Another question from the chat. For those who found specializations in sports medicine, maybe some that are less common, such as the ones that many of you mentioned, how did you balance the desire to be part of that niche, but also still having enough volume in other avenues of sports where you can like build experience and reputation in that niche? While you also build reputation, your experience in that niche.
Yeah, I call that niche your street cred, because people will be like, oh, so there's 180 Radio City Rockettes and employees for 3 months of the year. So that's not going to fill anybody's schedule, especially because they're all young and healthy. But like if somebody took one dance class once, then they would want to see you maybe. And so again, like just making sure that anybody that comes in, you don't say, well, I only treat ice skaters and you live in Florida. When they come in, you're just so glad they're there. You're there because they're in the right place and you want them to feel like they were in the right place and they made the right decision. And then they'll feel like they can send other people to you because every single person you see is a potential referral base.
Yeah, I think some of the, like for me with the baseball and TOS, I would love to have every person that I see be a baseball player. But it's just that's not going to fill your clinic. And I think there are only a few people around the country, most likely, that are only seeing those things. And so it's you remain in that through your own personal interest, but I don't think you can get the idea that that's what's going to entirely fill your clinic. So you do need to be a well-rounded sports med physician, and then as you have your interests, that will build up in your clinic as you do a good job. But I don't think it's ever like for me, I don't foresee a time where it's ever going to be purely overhead athletes in my clinic. There's just not enough volume for that, especially in these smaller kind of niches.
Awesome. Another very popular question I see a lot when talking about sports medicine myself is in the chat. Question is, how do you maintain work-life balance when covering multiple teams, events, and clinical duties? And as a fresh attending, I relate to this question.
I think some of that changes depending on where you are in life and career. And, when I didn't have kids, you can cover more things, stay later, say yes to more things. And then as, family grows and other obligations grow, you may have to, say no to things. I mean, one of the hardest things is knowing when to say no. And a lot of us as physicians, we want to help, and that's in our nature. But sometimes you're most helpful by saying no and focusing your efforts on other things. Giving the opportunities to some of the younger faculty, to the fellows, mentoring them. You can still be involved by, being a phone call or text away, but having them cover that event. So don't overextend yourself, but definitely try to seek out opportunity. And, I know a lot of folks that get busier as they get older and later in their career versus others that taper it down. So that can definitely change depending where you're at in life.
I would agree with that. My kids are 3 and 6, and I think after years of med school training fellowship, I felt the need to kind of take control of my schedule a bit, to the degree that I could. And so I've chosen as of this point to do sports coverage that's like a distinct period, and that's not multiple times a week. So going to Japan with the U.S. Deaf Women's National Team for 10 days, or covering our hospital biking event, or just, one day or 1 week long thing that I can commit to fully, but not necessarily multiple nights a week.
Say, I love sports. My husband loves sports. My kids love sports. So, like I said, I sort of call it work-life integration. My kids have been to bowl games. They've been to the Final Four. They sat 2 rows in front of Drew Brees at the Final Four. They know all our basketball players who are now in the NBA. And so, I'm busy-ish, but I like what I'm doing. So if I'm gone at night, I'm enjoying it, which is very helpful. And like I said, I bring my kids along. I both worked at both places. My D2 school, I had a baby I nursed at halftime underneath the bleachers in the middle of West Virginia, and just sort of made that part of how it works. And for my family, it's actually been really helpful. So, I mean, I think when you have tiny babies, it's hard sometimes if you're nursing or there's other stuff, but like after that, it actually was just really fun, and my kids have had great memories. We didn't have to pay for those bull trip vacations. So, you just sort of make it work.
Yeah, I really like that term work-life integration because that's true. Like as my kids have gotten older, like for the MLB All-Star game that was in Atlanta this year, I took my son with me and he, seeing all his favorite baseball players. And so as your kids get older, you can do things like that. With younger kids, it's a little bit more difficult. But I think you also have to realize that even within medicine, if we're not on call all the time and in the hospital working night shifts and things like that, like still every job I think within medicine is difficult and requires time commitment. So there's never going to be this perfect work-life balance. And so I think even with sports medicine, like working games and coverage is part of our call. And I want to be around covering baseball teams and doing some of these things. And it's stuff like Carly said, it's stuff that I enjoy doing, and it's probably part of, I like taking care of patients, but part of why we go into sports medicine is taking care of athletes, and part of what I enjoy is speaking and going to conferences and learning and things like that, and so I think you just have to realize that that's part of it, and you're probably not going to have a normal. While some people do, the people that just want to see patients from 9 to 5 every day, that is totally fine. But I think if you are really ingrained in the sports medicine world, like having a little bit of extra time outside of clinic and just learning how to integrate your job within your family, I think is important. But I also think you can't fool yourself and think there's going to be this perfect work-life balance.
So this next question I find very interesting, and I'm interested to get your opinions from the various levels of career experience that you have. When starting your careers, how do you balance patient satisfaction with best practice? How do you deal with maybe bad reviews or some dissatisfied patients that you might have had?
Okay, I have a great anecdote for when I moved to New York. So I had somebody who I saw, and I knew right away before I got my hands on him it was going to be patellofemoral tracking disorder. And I let him tell me his story, and we did our exam, and I made a plan, and he just wanted to keep talking to me. And I was like, how do I get this guy to go away and do what we agreed was the plan? He just wanted to hang out. And he ended up giving me my one bad review. And he was like, Dr. Rubish is obviously very knowledgeable, but doesn't have enough time to spend with her patients. I only had 10 minutes with her. She told me what was wrong, but didn't spend enough time with me. And I was like, you're mad I didn't waste your time? Like, what did I do wrong? And I turned to my colleague who's an orthopedic surgeon, and I was like, what should I have done differently? And he was like, I don't know. I never spend more than 5 minutes with my patients, but you're a girl. So, and I was like, oh, I don't know if that was it or not, but I learned to, I took that advice, because even though this person was upset that I didn't spend enough time with him, I had done a good job, but he didn't perceive it as such. And so it's not always doing a good job. It's making sure the patient feels like you did a good job. So some patients you just can't make happy. You just cannot. I find that I try to set expectations early. So I think for those of you who are on the call, I said, I always want to know how they found me. But I also want to know what their expectations are. So my MA, before I walks in the room, asks them, how did they find me and what are they hoping to get? Because if they're coming in and they're trying to gain understanding, great, we're going to spend our time on that. If they already have a diagnosis and they want a second opinion, then I'm not going to have them, we try to focus the time that you have so that you're getting to what they want. You're going to get what you need out of it because you're going to figure that out, but making sure that if they're going to ask questions, you get to those questions early so that you don't spend your whole time on the diagnosis and then realize they have 30 minutes of questions. And always make sure they know they're welcome to come back. So I always say, let's go on this journey together. Let's get this started. Do we feel like we have a good plan to start? So that they know they can come back. And when they come back, then we'll address more and we'll go over more. So it's not a one and done, but it's a relationship that you're building. And I haven't had anybody else complain that I only spent 10 minutes with them since.
That's a good one.
I really like that kind of let's go along this journey together. And even if I don't have, more time, it's a nice kind of way to show that you're still invested in them and kind of willing to, see them along the journey, even if you can't solve everything in one visit.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dr. Rich has some really great key points. I mean, understanding the expectation of the patients. I always ask, what are your goals for the visit? And, you can spend 5 minutes or an hour and the patient can feel like they've been heard or not. So using active listening, active feedback. I got a bad review. He just kept saying, uh-huh, and nodded his head. That's my way of showing I'm listening, but I wasn't verbalizing to the patient, I guess, in the way that they needed that I heard what they were saying, but showing and demonstrating that you're hearing what they're saying, basically saying back in different words, so that they know you're listening, showing that you care. I always end the visit, do you have any questions? And that way I feel like, we sort of close the loop and then trying to report back kind of what they said to me when they give a history so I understand what they're saying. The big thing is, being a good doctor, providing good care, the bad reviews will get diluted out. So don't let a bad review kind of change your style or how you want to practice. I mean, be a good doctor, listen, care. You'll get more good reviews than bad. Um, so yeah, try not to be too hurt by those reviews. It's not personal. The patient maybe had a bad day. And my old job, we didn't have great parking. A lot of the poor reviews were about the parking and like the phones, and you can't really do much about that.
I think another part of that question was in terms of like balancing patient satisfaction with best practice, and something that I sometimes find is that cardiologists, I feel like they know there's so many randomized controlled studies. We give this medication to X amount of people, it's going to prevent X amount of heart attacks or strokes or what have you. I feel like a lot of the literature in PM&R is sometimes a little bit more, you got to find the right patient, right situation for right treatment plan. So can you talk a little bit about kind of either how you use kind of literature to kind of work towards best practice, or how you kind of take the patient situation into account when recommending either interventions, ultrasound guided procedures, fluoroscopy, where some of the evidence is kind of more shades of gray.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I do in a lot of these situations is number one is you will be a better physician if you stay up to date on the literature and know the data for the treatments that you do. Because patients do like to hear when you say, there's so-and-so study that shows, and this is the reason I'm making this decision in my experience. And so I think staying up to date on the literature is very important. But like you said, for some of these procedures that we do, whether it be orthobiologics or a lot of the other things I do when it comes to thoracic outlet, like there isn't there isn't a randomized clinical trial to say do this. And I'll tell patients, you either tell them we're making this decision based on what I feel like is best for you. We don't have a large scale trial to basically guide this. We may be extrapolating from other studies. If it's a smaller joint we're treating and not a knee, I'll tell them that, look, we have very good data for a knee joint. This is a smaller joint. We don't have it. I'm extrapolating this data to make this decision. And I think people appreciate that. So I think still, even if there isn't the strongest data for a certain pathology or a certain procedure, I think knowing the data overall for the procedures that you do to be able to extrapolate and say, I'm basing this decision, even though we don't have it for this problem, we're kind of extrapolating and just knowing and making sure the patient knows that that's the rationale for you making this decision. I think they always appreciate that when I go through it with them, that we're trying to make evidence-informed decisions as much as we can.
I'll just double check in case anyone else wants to answer that before I go on to the next one.
I guess I can just jump up. I would say you just want to make sure you don't oversell things too. So when you say like 90% or you use numbers, I always say, your body didn't read the textbook, then this is data that we're using, and we're trying to apply this to you. And if I'm using my clinical experience and the numbers, but your body didn't read the textbook and it's going to do what it wants to do. And I'm happy to like make my recommendations, and we're going to listen to your body and it's going to tell us what it needs next. Because, if they like spend $3,000 3 times in 3 weeks for knee injections, and they're like, but you told me 90% of the people get better. And you're like, so you just want to make sure you set expectations as well when you're using data. And I think Dr. Bowers mentioned a good way, just making sure they understand that we're extrapolating this data, but that they're an N of 1.
Mhm. Oh, great point. I use that too. I think that's an excellent point. Another interesting question I have, relate to our early career physicians. A lot of your early career physicians struggle with, feelings of like imposter syndrome, especially fresh out of fellowship. You can only see so much in 1 year in fellowship, and we learn so much during our first 5 years as an attending. Maybe you guys could speak to a time when maybe you were challenged as an early career physician. Who did you talk to about maybe that case or situation you were in? Did you leverage any opportunities at national conferences to try to address a problem that a patient had that you wanted to discuss? Or maybe how you grew from that challenge that you had of feeling kind of like an imposter as an early career physician?
I will hop on this. So for all of you feeling imposter syndrome, I support you. I think it's just kind of part of medicine, honestly, as we go through the process, because there are so many hurdles we have to jump through. But definitely the first year it's been trying, but also so exciting. So I will just say some things that I've done that may or may not be helpful. And then I'd love to hear from my more senior colleagues as well. So I have like my people that I text and call, and I try to spread my questions out so I'm not just emailing or texting one person over and over. And I've noticed over time that I am reaching out less, which helps me with my own confidence. I'm like, okay, I am learning to handle these situations differently. Secondly, I read more now than I did in training. So I have like a stack of papers. I'm like constantly printing out papers. I have binders with sections for like every part of the body. And then I have a Google Doc where I write down a patient question I don't know the answer to, and then I try to write down the um, evidence to answer that question. And so if a patient asks me again, I can reference it, and it just kind of, it's like my own little library. So anyway, those are just some thoughts, but would love to hear what everyone else has to say.
Yeah, I know. I mean, when I first started, everyone's going to have their little blind spot. So, like, I was really good at foot and ankle because in residency, I worked in like a running clinic, right? So I had a ton of experience in that, but I had just not seen a lot of hand or hand fractures. Like, that's just how my training shook out. And so I made friends with one of our hand specialists when I started the Cleveland Clinic, and I was literally, once a week or more reaching out to him, asking him questions. And I also had folks in my clinic, like general orthos, so I was asking them questions. And I felt like I was asking questions so much, but I was getting smarter. I would try to like write notes and ask them why, not to say is this operative or non-operative, but like why. And so hopefully the next time I would understand. And then like a couple of years into my career, I texted him a question, and he was like, "Oh, I didn't realize you were still at the Cleveland Clinic. I hadn't heard from you in a while." And I was like, "I think I'm getting smarter at hand." So I don't do that as much now. But yeah, I still reach out to friends or sometimes talk through tough cases with friends, or even peers, just to sort of say, this is what I'm doing. Does that sound right? So yeah, I mean, and the other thing I would do, sometimes I would know the plan that day, but I would see that this was like a weak spot, and I just put on a Post-it note, like whatever the topic was. Sort of like Libby said, and then I would go back when I had time. Maybe I didn't have that time that day to look up something, but like I had a Post-it note. If I ever did get time, I would go and just learn a little more about that topic.
Yeah, imposter syndrome doesn't go away. So if anyone thinks it's going to go away, it never goes away. Medicine's a constant learning process. I tell our fellows and just learners in general, like especially fellows. So it's fellowship, you don't have to feel like you're going to learn everything in that one year. You're just trying to set a foundation. I tell them all the time, like my first few years out of fellowship, I learned exponentially more than I learned in fellowship because you're on your own, you're seeing patients, you're finding out how you want to treat patients. It's on you to know the data and the literature, and so it is a constant learning process that never ends. I look back now, I look back 5 years ago. So when I'm my first couple of years out of practice and I think about, I'll look back at notes and I'm treating a patient and I'll be like, what the hell were you doing, dude? Like just totally, not how I would manage a patient now. And then so that's just the way it goes. Like you're gonna evolve and learn over time. And there are still, I had a hand fracture today in clinic that, one of my good friends is a hand surgeon, and I'm asking them like, what do I do with this? Like, does this need surgery? And so it never ends. And so just realize that, the more that you learn and the more that you know, the more you're going to realize what you don't know. And I think if you realize that, it'll be helpful. But I think it never truly, in my experience, the imposter syndrome never truly goes away.
This is all great advice. I don't have much more to add, but I would just say, know what you know and what you don't know, and know what your limitations are. The patient would much rather you say, I'm not sure, but let me ask a colleague or phone a friend or refer you to another, person, as opposed to you manage it and you don't feel fully comfortable. So they appreciate you taking that extra time. And, all of us have, on speed dial or text, radiology colleagues, orthopedic colleagues, local mentors, but also remote mentors, and that network grows, as you get older. But as long as you're practicing, there's always going to be things that you don't know what to do with. But knowing your limitations, I think, really helps, and then knowing where to get those answers.
I'd just like to add that you should take that into account for your first job. So I stayed where I trained as a fellow. One, because my fellowship director was tired of being a fellowship director, so I knew I get to take over. But also, they were used to me asking questions, and I mean, there are advantages and disadvantages to that because I still was like, then the next year I was a fellow +2 and a fellow +3, so they always kind of see you as a fellow. But I used that to my advantage, and I shamelessly asked questions. I also made sure that my schedule didn't get stacked right away, so I would have time to look into the patient beforehand, so that I made sure I remembered the physical exam. And like if you're not comfortable with looking at x-rays, you can look at all the x-rays, but don't pick a job where you don't have a radiologist backing you up right away. So know your limitations, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and try to pick a job that's going to help you grow and safely do so, so that you can choose how you like to learn. Like go to a lot of conferences, go to a lot of lectures, all the things that are options to you.
Awesome. I'll just give our listeners a few more seconds to add a last minute question in the chat. If anyone has any last minute burning questions. I don't see any typing bubbles. So, all right, I will begin the closing part of tonight's session. So, number one, huge, amazing shout out. Thank you so much, Dr. Kirschner, Dr. Brown, Dr. Bowers, Dr. Rubish, and Dr. Day for coming and just giving so much of your time on an evening. Like we're saying, work-life balance, right? But here you are on the evening of a work day. I think we had such an amazing turnout, and so many people got to learn from all of your experience through your various years of careers and all your different levels in academics and private and academic practice. And the PM&R Education Subcommittee through AMSSM, Dr. Reiser, Dr. Levno, Dr. Peer are on here with me, and a few other members of our group have been jumping in and out, and we're all just so glad that you all came and listened to this, because we really are very proud of being PM&R residency trained physicians and then sports medicine fellowship trained physicians. We think PM&R is awesome, and we are very well and exceptionally set up to be amazing PM&R physicians, specifically in the sports medicine world, doing musculoskeletal medicine. All right. So we're very proud. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Huge shout out to our panelists. And be on the lookout for further wonderful things coming from AMSSM's PM&R Education Subcommittee. And thank you to AAP also for helping us host this event. Thank you all.